All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. Shalom, shalom. It is Monday morning, February the 17th, 2025. I hope you had a great weekend, and it's good to be together this morning. And we're going to be this morning, we're going to be in Psalm 107, which is really, it's an amazing psalm. It's an amazing passage. Before we get started today, just so you know, this week, our Torah portions for this week, our Torah portion is mishpatim, from the word mishpat, which means justice, and it has to do with judgments, rulings, decisions. This is the way that you're to interact with one another. This is what governance look like. So after having given the 10 Commandments, the Decalogue, that now very specific instructions about what about this circumstance, what about that circumstance, what are you supposed to do here? These things begin to get spelled out a little bit more. And so the Torah portion this week goes from Exodus 21:1 through 24:18, and then the Haftarah portions are Jeremiah 34:8 through 22, and Jeremiah 33. 25 and 26, and then Matthew, our Brit Hadashah portion, Matthew 5:38 through 42, and Matthew 17:1 through 11. But today we're going to start the week in the Psalms, and if you haven't downloaded our app, we encourage you to do that. You can go to the App Store, type in Shalom AZ. It's still not in the Google Store, so for those of you with an Android, so I'm really sorry. But it is available for Fire TV. It's available for Apple devices, and so if you haven't downloaded that, please do. And then if you would just take a moment today in the YouTube on YouTube or on Facebook to hit like, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and then share our daily bites, share our daily manna, and then thank you for your faithfulness in giving and in walking with us and supporting us, not only in prayer but financially. It is so needed and so meaningful, and we're so grateful. So thank you so much. All right, well, today we are in Psalm 107. It's a lengthy psalm, 43 verses. The title of today's daily manna is "Out of the Narrow Place," out of the tight place, out of that squeezed place. There are 4 cries, same answer. And so, it's what you see today in this passage. If you've ever been in where you felt completely overwhelmed, maybe you felt completely trapped or just lost, like I don't know how to get back, where you're like, my life is a mess. I don't know how I got here. I don't know how I'm supposed to get back to where I'm supposed to be. Maybe it's a time where you're looking and you're saying, I know I did this. Your own choices led to this, you being in this place, and now you're like, this is the consequences, and you recognize this is the consequences. Or maybe you're just living life, and then suddenly storms that you didn't see coming hit, and everything feels like it's falling apart, and everything was together, you had everything fine, and then suddenly you didn't. What do you do? Psalm 107 it's a song that's bearing witness. It's a song of testimony. And it opens saying, to you who are redeemed, say it, declare it. Let the redeemed ones declare it. And what we see each time, we have different groups. And each time, there's 4 times we see the same verse in Psalm 107, verse 6, verse 13, 19, and 28. And this, you can see this on the screen. It says, so they cried out to Adonai in their distress, and he brought them out. He brought them forth and delivered them out of their troubled, out of their out of that tight place, out of that place of being squeezed. So no matter which the situation, when they called, he answered. He rescued them from their distress when they were wandering, when they were in bondage, imprisoned, when they were sick as a result of their own rebellion even, or when they were simply overwhelmed and they hit their limits. Psalm 107, verse 1 opens up with a very familiar phrase, Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto. Right? Give thanks to the Lord. Hodu is to give thanks, or praise. It's from the word yada is the root word of hodu, which is to know, acknowledge. Acknowledge Adonai. Make him known. Give thanks to him. Praise him because he is good, and his chesed, his loving kindness, his faithful covenant love endures forever. Right, this is a common phrase throughout these psalms, particularly as we get into these psalms of praise and as we get to the great Hallel that would be coming up in beginning in Psalm 113. Hodu Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasdo. Verse 2 says, let the redeemed ones, let the redeemed of Adonai declare it. Those who he has purchased back, let the redeemed of Adonai declare it. Let them say so. Whom he redeemed from the hand of the foe, from the hand of the tsar, from the adversary, from the one who restricts you, the one who binds you up, that he brought you back out of that. Of course, we've in Exodus, we've just come through being brought out of the hand of Pharaoh, but this is on a much broader level. So let the redeemed of Adonai declare it. He redeemed you from the hand of the foe, those whom he gathered together out of the lands from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. All right, so he didn't just get you out of the hand of the foe, but then he gathered. The word gathered is kibbutz. It's a familiar Israeli word. A kibbutz is where they're gathered together, live on a kibbutzim that are gathered together. Well, he gathered you together, kibbutzam, out of the lands from the east and from the west, from the north and the south. So, who are these redeemed ones? Who are these ransom ones? Right? They were people who were lost or wandering, people who were bound up, people who were enslaved in all kinds of circumstances, in all kinds of for all kinds of reasons, but he has redeemed you. He has freed you, delivered you. So it says, so declare this, praise the Lord. Hodu Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto. I'm grateful to the Lord because he's good, for his love endures forever. So who are these ransom? Well, some of these redeemed ones, some of the ransom ones, were wanderers. They were wandering in the wilderness. Verse 4. Some wandered off, or could be to wander off or be led astray in a desert, in a wilderness, a wasteland. They found no way to an inhabited city. Hungry and thirsty, verse 5, their souls ebbed away or grew feeble. So they cried out to Adonai in their distress, in that tight place, and he delivered them, right? The word used here for to deliver is natsal. He snatched them up. He yanked them out of this circumstance. He delivered them out of their troubles, out of their afflictions, out of these tight places. So the first group were wandering. They're lost. They've been led astray. I don't know if you've been in that place where even spiritually you've just felt like you are ungrounded. You're spiritually lost. You're in a dry place. You're searching for meaning, for purpose, for fulfillment. You're never finding it. And maybe you got led astray. You believed all kinds of promises the world offers about happiness and success and satisfaction, but they all fall short, and you're left empty and restless and longing for more. And they were wandering in that place. But when they cried out to Adonai, he heard them. Verse 7 says, then he led them by a straight way. Like where he leads them, it's about him marching before us, that we're following him. They couldn't find an inhabited city. They're in the desert. They're wandering. They're lost. Don't know their left from their right. He gathered them together and led them to a city where they could live, where they could dwell. Let them praise Adonai for his chesed, for his mercy, for his love, and his wonders for the children of men. For he satisfies the thirsty soul and fills the hungry soul with goodness. Right? You were in the desert, in that wandering place, hungry, thirsty, wandering, alone. I need help, Lord. They cried out to the Lord in their distress, and he answered, and he snatched them out. And then he responded. He brought them to a place right? And he brought them to himself. So some of the redeemed, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Some were testifying and they're giving witness. That we were wandering in a wilderness. We were off the path. We were hungry, thirsty, nowhere to sit, nowhere to dwell. We called and he answered. He's good and his mercy endures forever. Some of them, we continue in verse 10, they weren't just wandering, they were bound. They were imprisoned in darkness. It says some sat in darkness, in deep gloom, in dark shadows, basically. Prisoners in misery and iron chains. Verse 11 says, because they were bitter, or they had defied, they were rebellious against God's words. And they had spurned the advice, the counsel of the Most High of Elyon. Right? So this group, they're in darkness and they're in bondage. They're in deep depression. They're miserable. And they're miserable because of their own rejection of God's counsel. They were rebellious and defiant against his words, against what he had declared, against his promises. They had rejected his advice. Right? So they had ignored his counsel. Now they're suffering the consequences. Sometimes our own choices bring us into this place, into bondage, where the sin that we embrace now has us. We don't have it, it has us. Our own brilliant, we thought we knew best, and now it's choking the life out of us. Addictions enslave. Guilt weighs us down, and in that place, it can feel hopeless, and you can begin to even feel, man, I did this, I deserve this. But even in that, the Lord allowed them to, when they decided they were going to rebel against his words, he allowed them to walk in the counsels of their own heart. He allowed them to do that and to experience the consequences. It says, so he humbled their heart with trouble. They stumbled and no one was helping. There was no one to support them. Right? So they got the natural consequences, the consequences which are baked in, which is why God says, don't walk this way. And we go, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And they rejected his counsel. They rejected his words. And now they're in a mess and they're bound up. And it says, so they cried out. Verse 13, they cried out to Adonai in their troubles, in their distress. And he delivered them. Now this, here the language is slightly different. In verse 6, it said, in there he natsal, those that were lost and wandering, he snatched them out, right? He snatched them away. Here, when it says he delivered them, it uses a different word, right? It says it uses the word for Yeshua. He saved them. He rescued them. He brought them victory, victorious help, right? Here they are in bondage, in dark gloom, a prison of their own making because they refused to listen to God's words. But as soon as they called, he is good, and his love endures forever. His mercy endures forever. So in the humbling of experiencing the consequence of the foolishness of their own decisions, they cried out to the Lord, and he answered them. He brought them out, verse 14, he brought them out of darkness and deep gloom, breaking their chains. It's the language there for breaking is snapping them in two. Let them praise Adonai. Let them give thanks. Yodu. Let them give thanks, give praise, acknowledge Adonai because he is good, for his mercy, for his love, and his wonders for the children of men. Verse 16, for he shattered bronze gates and broke into pieces iron bars. So the beauty of this portion where they were in rebellion, imprisoned, and as soon as they called, he brought them out of the dark gloom. He brought them out of the prison of their own making, and he snaps their chains in two. The bronze gates, he doesn't go, well, you did this, you got yourself into this mess, get yourself out of it. That's not who he is. What he wants is for us to finally turn to him and call on him and say, I need you. And then to learn from that and walk with him, right? And trust his word and trust his instruction. He shattered bronze gates, broke into pieces iron bars. So some were wandering off the path. They're lost. They called and he answered, and they had no place to sit, nothing to eat. They're in the desert. He quenched their thirst, filled them with hunger, filled their souls with goodness. Some were in darkness from their own defiance of his words. They called and he answered, and he shattered the prison doors, the doors they deserved. He violently breaks the chains that held them. Right? When we cry out to him, he doesn't just leave us in our chains, he shatters them. He breaks the gates wide open and sets us free. And then third, we get to verse 17. Some of these, that let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Some were lost. Some were rebellious. Some of the redeemed are giving thanks because they were suffering and also experiencing the consequences of their own rebellion as well. Verse 17, some became fools because of their rebellious ways, because of their defiant ways, their transgressions. They walked in rebellion. They walked in transgression. And they were afflicted due to their iniquities, due to their twistings. But the word iniquities here is really more tied to, the word here is, the root word is onah, which has to do more with sexual sin. So these were fools, people who, it's not just that the word evilim here, fools, refers to people who don't just lack wisdom, but they just reject wisdom. They had been warned by the Lord, but they didn't listen. They had God's counsel, but they ignored it. Now they're paying the price. And so now they're experiencing physical consequences. Verse 18 says their soul abhorred all food, and they drew near the gates of death. So they've hit rock bottom. Their bodies are failing. Their strength is gone. They're dying from self-inflicted wounds, right? Not just physically, but spiritually. And at this point, we might expect God to leave them there. Well, they made their bed. Now they have to lie in it. They did this to themselves. Let them suffer the consequences. Maybe now they'll learn their lesson. But Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki leolam chasto. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Give thanks to the Lord because he is good and his love endures forever. Because when they cried out, he didn't turn them away. Verse 19, he says, so they cried out, they summoned, they called on the Lord in their distress, in their troubles, and he delivered them. And again, it uses Yeshua. It uses that language again, just like it did with the rebellious in the previous section, out of their troubles. All right. So when they cried out, he doesn't hesitate. He didn't say, you did this. You got to learn your lesson first. I'll help you, but you're going to have to earn it. No, they cried out and he answered. Verse 20, he dispatched, he sent his word and healed them. He restored them and he rescued them from their pits. Let them give thanks. Let them praise. Let them acknowledge Adonai for his chesed, for his love and his wonders for the children of men. And in response, verse 22, let them sacrifice offerings of gratitude, of thanksgiving, and recount, let them tell of his works with joyful singing. Right, so let there be, having been delivered from, I was on death's door, my sin, my rebellion, my foolishness in rejecting the counsel of God almost killed me. And so what are you going to do? You're going to sing out, give thanks to the Lord, and let everyone know that his love endures forever. Let them know what he brought you out of and what he can do in your life. Let the redeemed of the Lord declare it. All right, so some of them wandered and were lost. Some of them were in self-made prison. Some of them were suffering physically because and were on death's door because of their foolish rejection of his word. But he sent his word not to condemn them, but to heal them. Oh, may we all give thanks to the Lord, for his mercy endures forever. And then finally, this fourth group of people, they weren't wandering. They weren't imprisoned or rebellious. They They were simply going about their business, either mindless concerning God, just apathetic concerning God, relying on their own skill, their own knowledge, their own wisdom to navigate life. This verse 23 says, some go out to the sea in ships doing business on the mighty waters. They saw the works of Adonai and his wonders in the deep. For he spoke and raised a stormy wind, lifting up towering waves. The waves mounted up to the sky and plunged down to the depths. In their peril, their souls melted away. So these were seasoned sailors. These are experienced merchants, business people. They're confident in their expertise, right? They had spent their life mastering whatever their craft was. But now comes a storm. Now comes a situation that's bigger than their skill, that's bigger than their wisdom. It says in verse 27, they reeled when the storm hit and the waves are higher than they can even begin to deal with. It says they reeled and staggered like a drunk, and all their skill was bewildered. That word skill, all their skill, that's the word for wisdom. All their wisdoms, it's in plural form, their wisdoms, their technical skills were swallowed up. That's the literal, like the sea swallowed up all that they had to offer. Everything they depended on, everything they thought that they knew wasn't enough to deal with what they were facing. Their strategies, their intelligence, their plans, it all collapsed under the weight of the storm. And they hit this point where they realized that no amount of wisdom, no amount of strength or skill could rescue them. How often do we just naturally depend on our own ability, our own knowledge, our own financial security, our own plans, only to find that when life throws us something we can't handle, all our wisdom is swallowed up. We're faced with a choice. We face whatever it may be. You could be facing a diagnosis that no one knows what to do with, or a financial crisis that career success can't prevent, a relationship breakdown that your communication skills can't mend. And in that moment, we're met with a choice. Are we going to keep fighting in our own strength? We're going to get swallowed up, or are we going to cry out to the Lord? Verse 28, so they cried out to Adonai in their distress, and he brought them forth. He brought them out of their troubles. When when human wisdom fails us, God stays faithful. Right? He never needed our expertise to save us. He always was our true source of security. The storm humbled them, but when they cried out to him, he delivered them. Verse 29, he stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves were hushed. And that the language is it's a command to keep silent. Shh. We cried out to him and he went, shh. And the waves were quiet. They were glad, verse 30, when it became calm. And he led them to their desired haven. Let them praise Adonai. Let them give thanks to Adonai for his chesed, for his love, and for his wonders to the children of men. So we cry out to him, and he delivers us, whatever the circumstance. Now let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Let them acknowledge him. Let them thank him. Let them praise Adonai for his love and for his wonders to the sons of Adam, to the children of humanity. Let them exalt him in the congregation of the people and praise him at the assembly of the elders. So this is a song of redemption, right? Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Who are the redeemed? Well, I was lost. I didn't know where I was going. And I said, I need you, Lord. And he brought me out of that desert, and he fed me, and he sustained me. And he brought me to a home. Or I didn't let the redeemed of the Lord say so. I was bound. I was so bound up in addiction, or I was so bound up in my anger, in my rage, or I was bound up in bitterness, in the consequences of my own decisions, and I called out to him. I was in such darkness, such deep gloom, and I called out to him, and he brought me out. He brought me out to himself. He rescued me. He saved me. All right, time and again. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. He heals us from our own rebellion when we call out to him. I thought I knew what I was doing. I was going about my business, and I hit stuff that I didn't know what to do, and I called out to him, and he didn't say, well, good luck. You tried without me before. Keep trying. No, and that when I called out to him, he reached down and he said to the storms around me, shh, peace, be still. Every time when they cried out to him, he answered. Not because they deserved it, but because he is good and his mercy endures forever. His love endures forever. And as we come to the final verses of Psalm 107, we move in from these very, we've zoomed into these very specific kind of groupings, these 4 groups of answers, but it kind of zooms out. It's not just a picture of personal redemption, but a picture of how God transforms circumstances, how he raises up the humble and brings down the proud. Verse 33, it says, he turns rivers into a desert, into a wilderness. And springs of water into thirsty ground. Verse 34, he turns a fruitful land into a salt waste because of the evil of its inhabitants. Right, so God will disrupt false security. He will frustrate the plans of wickedness. There comes a point, it may seem in the short term like, oh, it's all succeeding, but because of his love, he will disrupt false security and frustrate the plans of the wicked. He'll do whatever it takes to turn people away from death and back to life. If that means drying up rivers and allowing people to feel the barrenness of life without him, he'll do it. If that means removing stability so that people recognize they need him, he'll do it. Yet for those who are humble, those who cry out, he does something entirely different. The next verse is 35. He turns a desert into a pool of water and a dry land into springs of water. There he brings the hungry to live, and they establish a city for dwelling. So the same God who can dry up a river can turn a desert into a wellspring of life. The same God who tears down can restore and rebuild. Right? To the lost, he gives a home. To the broken, he brings healing. To the enslaved, he grants freedom. To the needy, he lifts them above their affliction. Verse 38, he blesses them. They multiply greatly. And he doesn't let their herds diminish. After they were few and crushed by oppression, calamity, and sorrow. Right? This is the story of God's people. It's the story of everyone who's ever cried out to the Lord in desperation. He doesn't just take us out of trouble. He blesses and restores and multiplies. But to the proud, to the self-sufficient, those who walk in ongoing rejection of him, the picture is very different. Verse 40, he pours contempt on princes, on the nobles, on those of great dignity, and making them wander in a trackless waste. Right, in the chaos, there's nothing, no way to go. In the chaos of there's nowhere to go. Right, those who exalt themselves will be brought low. Those who build their own kingdoms apart from God will find themselves wandering without direction, without stability, without hope. They may think they're in control, but ultimately their wisdom's not enough to sustain them. Yet for the humble, those who recognize their need for him, God raises them up. Verse 41, but he lifts up. And it means he makes them almost inaccessibly high. It's a high fortress. He brings you to a high fortress. Those who are needy, lifts them, the needy, high above affliction and makes their families like a flock. The upright see it, verse 42, and they are glad, and all iniquity shuts its mouth. Right? This is what the Lord does. Ultimately, he silences evil. He lifts up the broken. He satisfies the hungry. He makes a way for the lost. And so the psalm ends with this challenge, the final verse, who is wise? Let him be on guard, look at these things, and consider, the word here is to perceive, understand, Adonai's chesed, his loving kindness. Who is wise? Step back and take a look. and understand, see if you can grasp the love of the Lord. Right? The wise person sees God's love, seeks to grasp it, to walk in it. The wise person remembers what God has done, guards and seeks to understand everything that he does, even in discipline, that God is motivated by a relentless, faithful covenant love. Right? So whether you're lost, cry out to him. If you're in chains, bound by addiction or anger or fear or regret, or maybe you're suffering because of your own choices or your own rebellion, and you think, I can't ask the Lord for anything now, it's too late. No, let the wise fear the Lord and understand his love. Maybe you thought you had everything figured out till life proved otherwise. Wherever you are on the journey, the response is the same. Cry out to the Lord. Right? He doesn't ignore the desperate cry. He doesn't leave you to figure it out on your own. He doesn't say, well, you have to get it all together before he steps in. Right? He answers, he rescues, he redeems, he restores, and then he instructs. Give thanks to the Lord. Are you the redeemed of the Lord? Declare it. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Verse 2 again. Whom he redeemed from the hand of the foe. If he saved you, declare it. If he's redeemed you, let it be known. Proclaim it, because he is good and his mercy endures forever. Amen? Amen. Well, just a quick hello to everybody. Good morning to Steve and to Joshua, and good morning to Barbara and Kelly and Melody Woods and Jerry and Janet, and good morning to Ron and Amy and Sonia and Margarita and Pastor and Sister Martinez. Good morning, and let's see, to anybody else, to good morning to Carol, all right, and to Kathleen. Well, let that drive your week this morning as you begin a new week. Let the redeemed of the Lord declare it. Right? Remember where he brought you from and what he's done. He is good, and his love endures forever. All right, well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.